When I first heard the story, my fist clenched. Imagine being humiliated in your own building. By the way, my mother works in an office, so these issues are very close to my heart. This isn't just a story for views, it's real life experience, and the goal is for you to learn from it and don't repeat other people's mistakes. All names, addresses, and companies are fictitious or have been changed.
I knew the second he said it that he thought he'd won. Like he'd just delivered a TED talk that would go down in corporate history, leaning on that dumb espresso bar with his influencer hair and startup hoodie, grinning like a kid who just popped bubble wrap and thought he'd discovered physics. "Pack your box, boomer," he said, loud enough for the open office to hear. The two interns, God bless their clueless souls, snorted like it was improv night. He added with a smirk, "We're pivoting. Need fresh blood, not dead weight." Security was already waiting by the elevators, all stiff arms and nervous glances, as if I might barricade myself in the server room with a Sharpie and start writing Unix commands on the walls. I didn't even flinch, just nodded, grabbed my folder, and made the quietest walk of my career. Every step echoed like a goodbye I didn't ask for. No one looked up from their laptops. The new culture, I guess. Too agile to make eye contact. But just before the glass doors hissed open, I pulled out my phone and texted one name to my lawyer. No explanation. Just the name. That was all it took. Oh, and hey, real quick, while you're listening, only 3% of people who listen to these stories actually subscribe. It helps more than you think. If this story's already got your attention, hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the team to keep digging up the good ones. Anyway, that name I sent? It wasn't a hitman or some old college friend. It was the code name for a clause buried so deep in their lease it might as well have been written in Sanskrit on a papyrus scroll. Something I'd quietly inserted through a holding company I formed 12 years ago, Greymont Holdings. Nondescript name, ironclad paperwork, 30-year land lease, fully enforceable. And now, officially, violated. They didn't know it, of course, because tech boys don't read the fine print when they're too busy redesigning logos and holding Slack huddles about redefining vertical synergy. That morning, the clock started ticking at exactly 8:04 a.m. Elevator logs confirmed my exit, my silent cue that enforcement could begin. They'd given me the boot like I was just another relic from a dumber era. Thing is, I was from another era, just not a dumber one. Back when we still read contracts, built infrastructure before branding decks, and knew that ownership didn't mean having your name on a door. The thing that still makes me laugh, if you can call it that, because it's more of a dry, exhausted wheeze, is that I actually liked the kid. Yeah, he was arrogant. And yeah, he'd once tried to explain APIs to me like I was his aunt who just got Wi-Fi. But he had drive, hunger. I'd seen myself in him, years ago, which is probably why I didn't retaliate immediately when he first started cutting me out of ops calls and tossing legacy compliance jokes in team stand-ups. But disrespect has a shelf life, and mine had expired. You'd think the CEO, Sam Devine, Harvard MBA, full-time yacht collector, would have stepped in. But Sam had a habit of trusting whoever wore the newest sneakers. The younger, the shinier, the better. He called it keeping the brand young. I called it gambling with someone else's chips, so I walked out. Folder in hand, calm on the surface, surgical underneath. Not angry. Anger's loud, sloppy, imprecise. I was beyond that. I wasn't about to go viral screaming in a parking lot or write a 3-paragraph goodbye on LinkedIn about the next chapter. No, I had a different kind of post planned. The kind with stamped documents and a sheriff's seal. And while they sipped their oat milk lattes and gave each other high fives over slide decks and emoji reactions, they didn't realize they were already trespassing on a building that wasn't theirs. At least, not anymore. He strutted around like he'd just inherited the place from God himself, throwing around phrases like culture reset and lean transformation, as if buzzwords could patch over what he didn't understand. And what he really didn't understand was the foundation he'd just spit on didn't belong to the company. It belonged to me. The complex, 3 buildings, 1 subterranean server bay, rooftop HVAC units older than some of their junior devs, was built on land held under a 30-year lease. And that lease? Filed under a shell LLC I'd quietly set up when the company was still a pitch deck and 2 guys in a WeWork. I didn't name it after my family or anything obvious. Just a gray little thing called Greymont Holdings. invisible on purpose, boring on purpose, but its clauses fireproof. Clause 7.4c, that's the one they should have read. Breach of tenancy triggers immediate right of repossession. It didn't mince words. There were no cute grace periods or tear-stained mediation windows. Just breach, boot, and they breached. Payments had been late for 3 consecutive quarters. I'd flagged it through standard notices, dry, professional, legalese-laced reminders from the holding company's property services email. No personal contact, no signatures, no direct threats. Just enough to say, hey, you're drifting into shark-infested waters. They didn't bite. Or maybe they never even saw the fins. What they did do was forward those notices to some assistant who probably marked them low priority, assuming they came from one of the 100 vendors trying to upsell them on a parking lot expansion or a new HVAC contract. I could picture it. The emails sitting unread in a shared inbox titled Facilities, while Mr. Fresh Blood doodled rebranding ideas on his tablet and bragged to the board about cost-cutting initiatives. Thing is, when you cost-cut the one person who wrote the very ground rules of your existence, you better double-check you're not standing on a trapdoor. I wasn't emotional about any of it. That part of me had gone numb years ago. After the 3rd time, I was told my tone was intimidating. After I watched a junior I trained get promoted over me because he gave better off-the-cuff energy in pitch meetings. After the HR director used the word sunset in a sentence about people, I knew my expiration date was coming. I just decided I'd write the final chapter myself. So once I saw they'd missed their last payment again, no excuse, no acknowledgement, I didn't escalate. I initiated. The termination protocol was already sitting in a folder on my lawyer's desk. Drafted, notarized, waiting. All I had to do was say the word. And that morning, after they waved me off like yesterday's baggage, I did. The word was yes. That simple. My lawyer didn't hesitate. She didn't need a backstory or a play-by-play. We'd built this timeline 6 months ago when the first payment came late and my gut started screaming. Not loud. Just that slow, unsettling churn like something's leaking behind a wall and no one's noticing. The request went out to the county clerk. Fully backed by documentation. We had timestamps, scanned PDFs, payment logs, even Slack screenshots confirming the lease documents were flagged for review and never opened. It wasn't a revenge plan. It was infrastructure management. By 8:17 a.m., she'd filed the emergency motion. By 8:26, it was on the judge's desk. And if you've never seen bureaucracy move fast, let me tell you, it only happens when someone's already done the homework. Meanwhile, across the street, that glass and steel monument to millennial innovation was already shifting into day 1 of a new quarter. Big plans, new hires, free bagels, pep talk about being ruthlessly future-facing. They had no idea they were already squatting. No idea that somewhere deep in their shared drive, untouched in years, was a folder marked Lease Original, where all the warnings had been hiding in plain sight. And no clue that by the time they noticed the ground shaking, it wouldn't be metaphorical. It would be a court-ordered locksmith unscrewing their sense of control, one bolt at a time. Confirm enforcement? Her message blinked across my screen before I'd even reached the parking lot. No good mornings, no small talk, just legal precision in black and white. I typed back one word, yes. And that was it. I didn't need to explain. We'd walked this tightrope before. The eviction request was already prepared, signed, stamped, and sitting in a digital vault like a primed detonator. All it needed was my go-ahead. I had signed it weeks ago during lunch at a silent cafe near the courthouse, sipping chamomile while a notary slid it across the table like it was a menu. The holding company's name was all over it. So was the tenant's breach record. 3/4 of missed or incomplete payments, failure to address maintenance violations, non-compliance with Clause 9b about subletting access zones without written notice. It wasn't sexy stuff, just quiet, boring negligence. But boring things get you evicted. By 8:23 a.m., the county clerk had the formal motion. By 8:41, it had cleared processing. By 8:59, a judge stamped it with the kind of urgency people usually reserve for gas leaks and missing kids. The PDF hit my inbox at 9 down on the dot. Subject line: Order. 22 to 1911, emergency enforcement, breach triggered eviction order, effective immediately. I opened it on my phone like a text from an old friend, and just like that, the wheels began turning. Quiet, clinical, unstoppable. At 9:00 a.m., enforcement officers were dispatched from Precinct 11. Not private security, not some goon with a clipboard, but real officers, municipal, badge and gun official. Because when you violate a land lease in this county with an enforceable clause, it skips negotiations and jumps straight to orders. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing the system still works when you feed it the right inputs. Everyone's so obsessed with going viral, with publicly burning down their enemies for likes. But I didn't need fireworks. I needed signatures, and I had them. They were inside, probably passing around cold brew and workshopping buzzwords, while a sheriff's cruiser rolled past the visitor entrance and looped around the lot. And me? I was parked across the street, in my dusty blue Subaru, coffee balanced on the dash, watching it all from behind a tinted window. 55 minutes. That's all it took. From the moment I stepped into that elevator with their smug little chorus echoing in my ears, to the moment an officer radioed in, "Approaching site now." I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel fury. I felt balance. This wasn't revenge. This was maintenance, the same way you patch a roof before it collapses or replace wiring before it sparks a fire. They had breached. I enforced. End of story. No gloating, no speeches. I wasn't the villain in their startup documentary. I was just the one who signed the lease they never read, the one who never asked for credit, the one who'd been pushed aside for being too analog, too slow, too gray, but gray is solid. Gray doesn't crack under pressure, and gray knows the weight of paper can crush the weight of ego, if you stack it just right. So as the squad car rolled into frame, I sipped my coffee, unlocked my phone, and pulled up the timestamp. 8:04 a.m., my elevator exit. 9:00 a.m., their first knock. The rest? Already written. Through the windshield, I watched them parade through the glass atrium like they'd just IPO'd. Him in the front, waving his tablet like it was a scepter, flanked by fresh-faced hires still wearing their name tags from onboarding. He pointed to the ceiling-mounted projectors, the fancy coffee taps, the wall-sized screens looping fake dashboards with metrics that didn't mean a damn thing yet. One of the interns clapped. "Silicon Valley vibe," he declared, sweeping his hand toward the panoramic view. No cubicles, just pure collaboration. Behind him, the CEO trailed with a champagne flute, nodding like a dad trying to look cool at his kid's TikTok shoot. "To the future," he toasted, lifting the glass like they'd just reinvented gravity. I could almost hear the clink from across the street, where I sat in my Subaru, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through their building's page on the county records site. I'd posted the updated lease status that morning under the public access section. Owner of record, Graymont Holdings LLC. Lease status, terminated due to breach. Enforcement order, active. It was all right there. They could have found it between bites of whatever avocado mess catering they had planned for their investor lunch. But they didn't check, because people like him don't look down. They only look forward, past you, through you, beyond the rules that built the floor under their feet. At 9:45, the first squad car pulled into the main entrance loop. Clean, unhurried, lights off, like they were early for an appointment. One of the junior staffers noticed and tilted her head toward the glass. Her smile faltered. He followed her gaze, looked at the cruisers, and smirked. "Must be an escort for our investor lunch," he said with that insufferable chuckle, the kind that thinks the world is always here to applaud him. The CEO laughed too, but it sounded off, like it hit the back of his throat and stuck there. I set my phone down on the passenger seat and leaned back, one arm over the headrest. The breeze through the cracked window brought in the scent of late-season honeysuckle and asphalt warming under morning sun. It felt appropriate, a little sweet, a little scorched. They had 15 minutes, maybe 20, before the officers would be at the front desk asking for the facilities manager. I imagined the confusion blooming across his face. The way he'd puff up, try to out-alpha a sheriff's deputy. The way he'd demand to know who authorized this, like his name alone would cancel a court order. But this wasn't a committee decision. It wasn't a round-table brainstorm or a team vote. It was the math of cause and effect. Violate the lease, trigger the clause, activate the order, receive the consequences. And the beautiful thing about math is it doesn't care who signs the paychecks. My eyes flicked back to the building. He was still talking, pointing toward the open layout like he was guiding them into Narnia. One of the new hires was nodding along, probably thinking they'd landed a dream job. Poor kid. Wrong building, wrong dream. The other patrol car pulled up behind the first. The officers stepped out, calm, professional. One of them adjusted the strap on his utility belt and glanced at the digital clipboard in his hand. It was almost time. Inside the building, they were still pouring champagne, still floating on a fantasy paid for with broken promises and overdue checks. And all the while, the ground beneath their feet was already shifting, one clause at a time. At exactly 9:59 a.m., the building's sliding glass doors whooshed open with their usual cheerful chime. But this time, it wasn't a latecomer with a protein shake or an investor wearing Allbirds. It was 4 officers in full uniform. They didn't hesitate. They didn't glance around like they were lost. They moved with purpose, walking past the marble-topped check-in desk straight into the lobby. "Is the facility manager here?" one of them asked, voice steady, eyes scanning. The new manager, Mr. Fresh Blood himself, stepped forward, still holding a half-empty champagne flute. "Why?" he said, chest puffed, mouth already curling into that smirk he wore like cologne. The officer didn't blink. "We're executing a court-ordered eviction. You have 3 minutes to open the server room and main offices. Then we change the locks." For a split second, no one moved. You could hear the bubble pop in someone's mimosa. Then the laughter that had echoed off the high ceilings for the last half hour collapsed like wet drywall. "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked, stepping closer like proximity might change the law. "This is a tech firm. There's clearly been a mistake." The lead officer held up a thick, printed document with the county seal in full color on the front. Across the top, Order 22-1911, repossession of land and structures, effective immediately. The server room, the main offices, the building, all of it. Not a misunderstanding, not a negotiation, not a drill. Behind him, a ripple of voices rose, muffled calls, footsteps scuffling on tile, the buzz of phones waking up in palms. One of the interns looked pale. The receptionist leaned forward, lips parted, as if the words would explain this away. But the officers didn't come for explanations. They came for execution. Someone called the CEO. Too late. By the time his number lit up on the manager's phone screen, the officers were already separating the crowd, instructing staff to step back, alerting them that anything left behind would be boxed and cataloged for legal return. One officer gestured to the glass conference room where a team was gathered, mid-meeting. "That space needs to be cleared," he said flatly. "But we're in the middle of onboarding," one of them protested. "You're now in the middle of an active repossession," the officer replied, flipping to the second page of the order. Meanwhile, across the street, I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. Just watched, quiet as snowfall, while the building I'd leased out of trust and logic and 20 years of strategy transformed from the future of agile tech into a panicked fishbowl of frozen ambition. They hadn't just lost an office, they'd lost the illusion that they were in charge. And that illusion, once broken, doesn't patch easy. At 10:04 a.m., just as one of the officers reached for the keypad outside the server room, my phone buzzed in my lap. Sam Devine. The CEO, the yacht guy, the man who once called me a stabilizing presence and then quietly let me get replaced by a boy who hadn't yet filed his own taxes. I let it ring once before answering. "Sam, why are the police sealing our offices?" His voice was already cracking, like someone waking up mid-nightmare. "There are armed officers in the server room. They're saying we're being evicted. This is insane. This has to be some kind of mistake." "It's not," I said, voice flat as concrete. "You violated 3 terms of the lease I drafted." Silence. I could almost hear his brain trying to reboot. "Wait, what lease?" "The one your company signed 13 years ago when you needed a landholder to secure building permits on this block. The one filed under Greymont Holdings LLC. The one you haven't reviewed since 2016. Another silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "You wrote that lease?" "I did." A longer pause. "And you're the owner?" "I am." and you just got kicked off my land. It wasn't gloating. I didn't need to gloat. The truth was doing all the heavy lifting. My voice wasn't angry or cold. It was just settled, like gravity. Like gravity doesn't argue when you fall, it just pulls. I heard a door slam on his end, probably stepping away from the panic, trying to find somewhere he could think. Maybe one of those glass offices he once bragged gave transparency to leadership. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, almost pleading now. "Because it was never about me, Sam. You wanted fresh blood. This is what a transfusion feels like." He exhaled, ragged, hollow. Somewhere in the background, I heard someone shout, "They're locking the equipment room." Then, more scrambling, more chaos. I need to talk to you," he said finally, words tumbling. Can we fix this?" "That depends," I said. "On what?" "On whether you're calling to negotiate or to listen." Another pause. "I'll listen." "Then forward this to your board. Operations are suspended until new terms are agreed upon with the leaseholder in full standing. You can find the contact info in the eviction packet." He didn't respond. Didn't need to. By the time he ended the call, an email had already gone out to his board. Subject: immediate ops suspension. Leaseholder enforcement in progress. I leaned back in my seat and watched 2 officers escort the last group of employees out the front doors. The building stood quiet now, still, like it was finally breathing again, and for the first time in years, so was I. We met in a temporary conference room 2 blocks away, the kind of sterile rented space you book by the hour when your headquarters is sealed behind court-ordered locks. The walls were off-white, the table was fake wood, the air smelled like recycled HVAC and faint panic. The board was already there when I walked in. 5 people who'd once glanced over quarterly metrics with one eye and brunch menus with the other. Now, they looked like people who'd just realized the floor could fall out from under them, which it had. I didn't smile, didn't offer a handshake, just set a crisp navy folder on the table and sat. "New lease terms," I said. Simple. No drama. The folder sat there like a quiet ultimatum. They didn't reach for it right away. I could feel the hesitation. The silence in the room was dense, less from tension, more from resignation. The CEO, Sam, finally opened the folder. His hands weren't trembling, but they were slower than I remembered. He scanned the first page. Monthly rent, up 18%, due on the 1st. No grace period. First and last month due upon signing. Utilities now billed separately. Subletting, prohibited. Page 2, occupancy policy, updated background checks, quarterly site inspections, any breach of compliance, any triggered immediate suspension pending review. Then page 3. The clause I'd written while sipping iced tea on my porch 3 nights earlier, listening to crickets and thinking about all the ways arrogance costs more than rent. Clause 11C, I said. Unilateral termination in case of personnel misconduct. Sam blinked. What counts as misconduct? I tilted my head. Letting your head of ops eject the property owner like a temp intern's coffee run qualifies, I'd say. No one argued. And, just to be clear, I added, he is no longer permitted within 500 feet of the premises. That language is non-negotiable. The head of legal, Marcia, a woman who once asked if I'd considered retiring with grace, cleared her throat but said nothing. The rest of the board shifted in their chairs like middle schoolers caught cheating during a pop quiz. I assume you're not here to sabotage us, Sam said carefully, his voice measured. So, can we move forward? I'm not here to sabotage you, I agreed. I'm here to correct a misunderstanding. He nodded. No one asked for red lines. No one suggested edits. No one so much as lifted a pen. After all, when the walls are gone and the power's cut and the badge access doesn't work anymore, you learn real fast who's actually holding the keys. So they signed. Each of them. One by one. Quietly. Like people who'd just come to terms with gravity. When it was done, I stood. Your offices will reopen tomorrow. Your equipment will be returned. Your servers will power up. Sam exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Maybe he had. I paused at the door, hand on the knob. Oh, I said casually, and I'll be conducting the quarterly site inspection myself. Might even bring donuts. Sam looked up. Understood. This wasn't revenge. This was a reset. And this time, the terms were mine. He showed up the next morning like nothing had happened. Same hoodie, same smug stride, same phone-in-hand posture like he was live streaming his own greatness. Probably thought the whole incident was some clerical glitch, that his value would speak for itself, that someone would apologize for the inconvenience and hand him a fresh badge with a warm muffin. Instead, the front guard, Eli, a Vietnam vet who doesn't blink even when sirens wail, just lifted his clipboard and said, "Name? Tyler Vance, head of ops." Eli flipped a page, finger tracing the list, then stopped, looked up. "You're not on the approved list." Tyler's smirk cracked for a second. "Check again." I did. "There's gotta be some kind of mistake," he said, a nervous laugh trying to hold the line. "I'm the manager." Eli didn't even shrug. Not anymore. Tyler's face fell through 3 stages: confusion, disbelief, and something close to panic. He leaned closer, as if proximity might change the rules. "I helped build this place," he hissed, voice dropping. "I've got a team in there. We've got deliverables this week." Eli didn't move. "Then you'll want to contact your board. This property's under new operational terms." "Who the hell are you people?" he barked, stepping back. That's when he saw me through the glass. Inside, near the back corridor, clipboard in hand, walking the facilities team through a checklist of cable runs and power junctions. I had on work boots and a plain black polo. No titles, no fanfare. He froze. I looked up. Our eyes locked. He waited for something. Acknowledgement, recognition, maybe even a sarcastic smirk to match the ones he used to toss across the hallway when he'd overwrite my protocols and act like he'd streamlined operations. But I didn't wave, didn't nod. I just turned back to the checklist, pointed to an open wall panel, and kept talking. Because Tyler wasn't a threat anymore. He wasn't even relevant. Behind me, a tech marked offline redundancy on the audit sheet. Someone else ran a final latency test on the network node he'd once insisted was too legacy to matter. I didn't correct them. I'd stopped correcting a long time ago. Outside, Tyler paced near the entrance for another 15 minutes. Tried to call someone, then someone else, then probably HR, but the system had already moved on without him. The internal memo had gone out that morning. Operational access granted. David Harrow, Senior Leaseholder Liaison. A subtle line buried near the bottom carried all the weight. All prior credentials have been revoked until further notice. By noon, Tyler was gone. By 12:04, the last trace of his name had been wiped from the internal dashboard. By 12:10, no one even asked where he'd gone. And me? I checked the final lock replacements, confirmed keycard permissions, marked my initials at the bottom of the page, then turned to the last task on the list. One move left. A quiet one, but the kind that lands with weight. They thought it ended when I handed back the keys. When the new lease was signed, when the champagne ran dry and the eviction tape came down, they figured the damage was done. Lessons learned. PR adjusted. Future protected. The head of ops was out. The offices reopened. The board quiet as a tomb. But damage has layers, and contracts have memory. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope landed in the board's inbox. Not from me, from Graymont Holdings Billing Division, standard header, legal watermark, all very boring. Inside was an itemized invoice, total amount due $312,000, relocation damages, lock replacement, back rent for the breach months, clause-triggered penalty for unauthorized third-party tours. And my personal favorite? A breach fee for Clause 7.4c, which had sat dormant in the agreement like a rattlesnake under the porch for over a decade. It wasn't dramatic. It was math. The board held an emergency session, this time in their backup meeting room offsite, still awkwardly decorated with folding chairs and a whiteboard that smelled like expo markers and panic. "Can we fight this?" one of them asked, flipping through the invoice like it might change if she stared hard enough. The CFO looked up from his laptop, pale and sweating. "No," he said. "It's airtight. Every clause, every amount, every signature." Silence. No one asked who drafted the original lease anymore. No one laughed about retirement vibes or legacy baggage. No one dared say my name. I wasn't there, of course. Didn't need to be. My attorney had already set up auto notifications for payment tracking. First reminder, 10 business days. Second reminder, legal collection initiation. By then, the cost would only go up. Back at the building, the new facilities team was humming. Systems restored. Compliance logs tightened. The walls quiet again, not silent, just focused. No more ego parades through the glass atrium. No more TED Talk managers disrupting HVS upgrades to give pep speeches about synergy. And him? Tyler was spotted last week in a co-working space across town, pacing near a kitchenette that smelled like burnt toast and desperation. He was on a Zoom call, voice loud enough for someone nearby to hear him say, "We need to rebuild the culture from scratch." The camera angle was bad, the lighting worse, and the only thing behind him was a white drywall panel with someone else's startup logo half peeled. I watched the clip. Someone forwarded it to me anonymously. No caption, just a wink emoji. I didn't reply. Just saved it to a folder marked Archive, Closure. There were no parades for me, no LinkedIn victory laps. I didn't need them, because I'd never raised my voice. All I'd done was file,